If you're feeling pulled in 1,000 different directions by wellness trends that ask you to wake up at 5 o'clock, go do some breath work, and then take a cold plunge, don't forget to do your yoga, add in some strength training and your 10-step beauty routine, it's bound to feel overwhelming. I couldn't keep up with my endless wellness to-do list until I found a single practice that I could just keep repeating instead of doing 10 things. So in this video, I'm going to show you why Ashtanga Yoga might be the most efficient practice that was built for people like us who are householders with jobs and families and things that we have to do. And this will then allow us to make the most of the time that we do have on the mat instead of expecting ourselves to have 10 hours of practice time every day. So let's dive right in, and I hope you enjoy this video. Our culture today has created this impossible standard when it comes to wellness routines. But even thousands of years ago, it wasn't like yogis were expected to abandon their families and go off into a cave and be a yogi and practice there all the time. In fact, there are many instances of historical big figures like Vasishta or Vishwamitra or Yajnavalkya, all rishis, all sages who had wives, who had children, and actually held positions of power. So why is it that we expect ourselves to be this version of ourselves that's drinking green smoothies and always going to yoga and feel like we need to have endless time to do all of these things? In fact, it's unrealistic and unsustainable for most of us because our practice is our responsibilities. So if you're a mom with 2 young boys, then you know that actually being there for them and being aware and being fully present with them is the practice itself. According to the Bhagavad Gita even, it's not like a yogi is someone who is completely renunciate. A yogi is someone who is fulfilling the actions in the world with as much detachment as possible and not worrying about the fruits of their actions, but is actually fully engaged in the actions themselves. So why is it that we expect ourselves to give up everything, go on a retreat to Bali, and instead, why can't we find it in our day-to-day lives through an efficient practice? And this is where the Ashtanga system comes in, because the Ashtanga system was designed to be a practical method for householders to fit in an entire spiritual practice in just under 2 hours. So it's not like you're going to be spending 10 hours a day practicing if you've just got a limited amount of time. Let's briefly dip into the history of this practice so that we can understand its design. So Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, who is considered to be the father of modern yoga, was given this practice by his teacher Ram Mohan Brahmachari. Now, when he finished his training, Krishnamacharya was instructed to go and teach this practice to householders instead of being like a scholarly ascetic, which he was completely qualified for. And this came as a surprise to him because his teacher told him to go and get married and have a whole family so that he understands the problems of real people, of everyone that needs this practice, not just those who can renounce normal life and go live in a cave. And so this was the challenge that Krishnamacharya was faced with, and then he was directed to study and really immerse himself in a text called the Yoga Kurunta, which was developed by Vamana Rishi, where he set out these sequential postures that was built for householders. The only difference was that in this text, you weren't expected to meditate for 2 hours, chant for 1 hour, study scripture for 1 hour, do all of these things separately. The key innovation of this kind of practice was that instead of practicing for 10 hours a day, we practiced the 8 limbs simultaneously instead of sequentially. This compressed format meant that within the asanas themselves, you would practice pranayama, you would practice mudras and meditation. And the result was cool because instead of using 10 hours to practice, you now needed only 2 hours to practice, and you're not losing its essence. And this is why we don't hold postures for so long within the Ashtanga Vinyasa system. We hold them for 5 breaths and then we move on. And the reason is that when you hold things only for 5 breaths, you're not getting caught up in the shape itself or creating an identification with the body. You're actually treating it like all the tasks in your day. So now the question I have for you is, what if the postures were never meant to be the end goal, but rather just a doorway for something far more profound? One of the greatest traps in modern yoga is that we get really attached to the body and becoming preoccupied with the body and trying to make it perfect. Maybe it's handstands or full lotus, whatever it is. And they think, wow, that makes me such a great yogi. But in fact, it couldn't be further from the truth because it's actually the perceiving of the awareness that is in the asana. That is the true goal of yoga. And the core technique in Ashtanga is always to shift the focus from the shape itself to the breath that's moving the shape. And in this way, we access the internal aspects of the 8 limbs of yoga, like Pratyahara or Dharana or Dhyana, and we remove the focus almost from the external body and turn it inwards. And with time, we notice that these postures themselves are just shapes, they're impermanent. And just like we can see our responsibilities as things that change and shift, we notice the impermanence of our life itself, and we realize nothing impermanent is worth clinging to, and therefore Ashtanga in a way is kind of like a meditation on impermanence in itself. In practice, it looks something like this. Our breath is the first thing that we train, and by linking our movement to our breath, we then create this kind of moving meditation. Next comes the Drishti. So focusing our awareness on points that we choose actually practices Pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. So instead of the senses being overwhelmed by everything around us, we then allow ourselves to be focused and directed to one chosen point. And this slowly trains our senses to be within our control. Next is the Vinyasa count. So counting ourselves down silently is maintaining this sense of dharana or concentration. So when we can just focus on our breath, stabilize our eyes, and internally follow the count, our mind doesn't have that much space to think about our dinner plans or anything else. And in this moment, we then have an opportunity to witness our bodies in space, witness our practice itself. And this is what leads to a state of meditation. So in this system, you're not practicing individual limbs, you're actually trying to practice them simultaneously in one flow. And when they're happening simultaneously, you'll notice that every sun salutation then becomes a chance or an opportunity for you to practice mindfulness. So bottom line is, you need to make the most of the time that you do have. This system was developed to be efficient and was developed for people like us with jobs and busy lives. So the first thing that we need to understand is that balance is more important than perfection. So every day may not look the same, but your yoga doesn't have to look like that. Your yoga is the thing that enables you to show up to your family, show up to your work in a much more balanced state. And it's not about running away from your responsibilities or needing a retreat every 3 months. It's actually about something that you can do for yourself so that you realize that your real life is your practice, and the yoga is just the thing that enables you to show up in a different, more present way. Secondly, it's efficient by design. Now, Rishi Vamana, the seer who actually conceived of this system, created these sequences in a specific order so that we actually don't waste our time and we can combine all the 8 limbs and actually practice it really efficiently in under 2 hours. And thirdly, we have to realize that it's quality over quantity. So it doesn't matter like if you can spend 1 hour or even 15 minutes on the mat. You don't need to feel guilty about all the things that you have to do for the day. It's about just finding the right practice and then understanding how to use that so that you can derive maximum benefit. And yoga is therefore far more relevant today in our busy and distracted world, and it's not so much about whether you have time for yoga, it's about whether or not you're making the most of the time that you do have. And in this video, I tell you exactly how you can fix your basics using real life examples of my students and how I help them balance both strength and flexibility. So be sure to check that one out and watch and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I'm going to be dropping more videos every single week about how you can use this ancient system to actually improve your life.